Godzilla! What up, everybody? DJ Anubis here with you, the Military Radio Podcast, doing another episode of Kaiju Unlimited. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about a subject that I don't know too much about, other than the fact that I've kind of wanted to see it for a while. I've been talking with a lot of people, a lot of the Kaiju fans. This is something that gets brought up all the time about, why hasn't Godzilla ever fought Gamera when it comes to the Kaiju world? And between these two franchises, we've never gotten it, but outside of that loose talk, like I never realized that there was actually plans to kind of do one. I mean, apparently in the 90s and in 2002, there were plans to make a movie confronting Gamera with Godzilla by, I think, someone named Dae as well as Kato Kawa, if I get that right. But neither one of those films were produced. And, just a little backstory with my appreciation for Gamera. Gamera was never like really one of my overall favorites, but because I love giant monster movies and stuff, it was easy to gravitate to movies in the early '60s and whatever that I saw because as a young kid. But obviously, they approached things a little bit differently back then. They really used a lot more kid-friendly interaction with the creature and how the kids were kind of featured in the movies as far as the human characters were concerned. But I came to appreciate the 90s trilogy a lot more with Guardian of the Universe, was it the Revenge, Attack of the Legion, or Revenge of Virus. Those three films are really more mature to a more adult-oriented type of Gamera films. So I can appreciate those more. And then, of course, Century and we did a review for the animation in 2023 with Gamera Rebirth, and that was amazing. So it mixed up a little bit of everything, but too bad it never went with like a live version of that. But either it's much cheaper, obviously, with the animation to do that. But yeah, so we keep talking within our circles, like really want to see Gamera and Godzilla go at it. I mean, we've got Kong and Godzilla. But we never got like Gamera and Godzilla. It's really weird when they're both Toho products. Now, granted, both these creatures can be seen as like Earth defenders, so it's not like one would necessarily be the villain unless you actually opposed it. So let's just for shits and giggles say that the gentleman that did Minus One on the sequel decide, you know what, we have already a bad Godzilla, right? We have the basis for our bad Godzilla. Let's introduce Gamera somehow. Like I know I'm way off the left field because he's not even probably thinking about that. But if you were going to do that where one was the villain versus the heroic one, that might be the way to go about doing it. The other thing is, how would Gamera stack up to Godzilla? I mean, now Gamera has like his flame balls and flame thrower, breath or whatever, and then he can fly. That's something that he's always been able to do, even though it's kind of weird to see a turtle flying, but still cool nonetheless. But then again, Godzilla is just a powerhouse. He is king of the monsters for a reason. So anyway, there was a video I just happened to come across yesterday or the day before, and a channel called Dragon Curve, and basically it says the Gamera versus Godzilla film we never got to see. So he's probably basing it off the information from the two that were supposed to do one, but I have not watched the video. It's not very long, but figured it'd be kind of cool to talk about a little bit, and I'll do a reaction video to it and see what he says about what was supposed to happen and why. How close did we get? And I don't know how many of you actually know much about the story behind this, supposed failed projects or whatever, but let's take it a look and see how it goes. I don't know what he's going to say.
After the massive success of Toho's 1990s run with Godzilla, the company killed the giant monster off in order to pave the way for the next iteration the monster was scheduled to appear as, the 1998 Hollywood remake directed by Roland Emmerich right after Independence Day. That American movie was also being made around the time rival Japanese company Daiei was making their wildly popular Gamera trilogy, the final film of which happened to come out just 1 year later in 1999. But did you know that during this period in monster movie history, and even shortly after, there was a pitch to make the two monsters fight each other in what I can only describe as being one of the most insanely cool movie ideas we never got to see. What's going on, guys? Hope you're all doing well. Now, when it comes to the projects that have gone under the name Godzilla vs. Gamera, or Gamera vs. Godzilla, whatever you want to call it, this was actually not just some wild fan theory that had no legitimate backing to it at all. Unlike a lot of wild ideas that monster movie fans everywhere would love to see, the concept of these two specific monsters fighting each other was not only discussed internally within both Toho and Daiei, but they actually approached one another at different times.
Okay, so Daiei is actually the company that I guess owns Gamera. Like I always assumed it was Toho, but I guess it's not Toho. It's actually Daiei. So maybe that's the disconnect as to why it never happened. People cleared that up for me, but I guess that's the reason why.
In order to make it happen. During a press conference for Gamera Guardian of the Universe in 1995, author Masumi Kaneda described Daiei president Yasuyoshi Takuma mentioning this idea to pit Gamera against Godzilla from the Toho films. In fact, the reports are actually that Takuma went to Toho with the idea for a movie featuring both monsters, which would obviously have to be a joint production between Toho and Daiei. But after the man passed away in 2000, all those talks kind of fell through. It looks like Daiei wasn't really ready to commit to an idea like that, even though it would obviously have been a big hit. Because at the end of the day, both studios would have had to supply the money up front and then somehow split the box office between them. That's not ever really been commented on, by the way, but it's just common sense when it comes down to everything. So due to Godzilla dying in 1995 after the events of Godzilla vs. Destroya, and since these talks were happening that very same year, I guess the idea...
Well, he didn't really die. We have Junior, so he's still there, but I get his point.
idea would have been for the resurrected Godzilla Jr. to have done battle with Gamera in a movie set after the events of Guardian of the Universe. You know, once the radiation from the older Godzilla falls onto the little one, he comes back to life, and so he's basically the new Godzilla fighting the new Gamera. That would be an early obvious idea that they could jump forward with if this movie were to ever be made. That being said, no legitimate information on a plot for the film has ever honestly surfaced, and
yeah, the only problem now is that because so much time has passed, I mean, you could technically connect it to that film and use Junior, but I think at this stage, again, like I go back to my idea about minus one with that one, since he's already the villain. Like at the time that Godzilla Destroya like came out, Junior was still kind of seen as like not really evil. Like that's the thing, they kind of just had a softer spot for him because he wasn't as aggressive as his daddy was in terms of the film and the series itself. So in this case, you would have to find a reason for Junior, who would be now full grown, to be like a villain in this, like unless you're making Gamera the villain, which I don't think he's ever been the villain except for how he was portrayed by the 90s series for a short time before he was able to win him back over. They kind of used like the same principle with Gamera in the 90s as they did with G 2014, where going into King of the Monsters, it was like, well, Godzilla is more of an anti-hero, but because he ends up killing innocent people, they're the people that lose loved ones become angry at Godzilla, even though he's really kind of fighting on their side. But because there's so much collateral damage, there's a lot of animosity. So in like, the Revenge of Iris, it's sort of that thing where this girl loses her parents to Gamera because buildings are toppling over and whatnot while he's fighting the Gaius, and all of a sudden, she's resentful as a young girl, and so she bonds with this creature that's able to come out and attack Gamera in a different way. Obviously, if you've seen the movies, you know what I'm talking about.
Keep in mind, this is all going on while Stan Winston and Jan de Bont are working on their very own version of the American movie, which ultimately turned into the Matthew Broderick film pretty much every one of you has seen. Interestingly, the late 1990s weren't the only time Godzilla vs. Gamera was being pitched, because even though Daiei were the ones to decline the collab after Takuma's death in 2000, plans to make the movie started popping up again after Daiei was purchased by the Katakawa Corporation in 2002. So in just 2 short years...
Okay, so these aren't even specific people. These are like companies. So Daiei and Katakawa are... I didn't know that. I thought they were actually people, but they're just companies that are trying to get this film made.
The answer went from a solid no to a very big yes. Actually, we do want to make that movie now. The president of that company, Kazuo Kurai, announced that very same year that they were trying to make new projects based on older Daiei properties, one of which was a Godzilla vs. Gamera movie. Toho would be approached to make the movie, but this time they turned down the idea. By this time, they had not only made Godzilla 2000, but were deep into their Millennium series of films, none of which really had much of a continuity at all, save for Godzilla against Mechagodzilla and Godzilla Tokyo SOS. This pretty much led to the new company that bought Daiei to make Gamera the Brave in 2006, and Toho ended their newer Godzilla series with Final Wars in 2004, which I gotta say, that would have been the perfect movie to, at the very least, drop a cameo for Gamera in there somewhere. I mean, they don't even have to fight each other. He could have just shown up. It probably would have been super inexpensive, but
yeah, I don't know how you even make a cameo with them. I mean, what would he be doing? Like, unless it was just something like he's doing a flyby the UFO or something. Just flying by just for shits and giggles. I mean, look, Final Wars is kind of fun in like a funny way at times. So just having Gamera, like, the aliens, like, saying like, all right, we're gonna sit out. What the fuck is that? And then just see like Gamera fly by back out into space or something. Like, I don't know, but that would have been more of like a nod or just a quick cameo, which would have made no sense, really.
Now, believe it or not, 20 years later, this project still gets brought up by fans, and in 2021, Shogo Tomiyama gave his own answer about why the movie being made is pretty much all but impossible. His words on the subject were, quote, "Perhaps Godzilla or Tokusatsu fans would want to see it, but there would be no benefit for the filmmakers to make this movie," which pretty much confirms my whole common sense statement I made earlier. Look, guys, with 2 Japanese companies, these productions are always less expensive than Hollywood movies because they make less money. And once you start talking about making Godzilla and Gamera in the same film and splitting the box office for them, you gotta understand that from the producer's standpoint, there's just not that much money to actually be made.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I get it, but let's think about this, right? So Toho makes Minus One, and it does well on a small budget. Now, obviously, let's say they took 15,000 and did the same thing and made Godzilla versus Gamera. You would have to split whatever proceeds came out of that. I'm not sure what the final financial money was for Toho on that. I mean, they made some bank on it. I mean, much more than they, initially put into it. So I don't know like how they can say you're not going to make any money. I mean, obviously it's going to come down to like the percentages and, as long as people don't get overly greedy. But like, here's my other thought too, is like, and I don't know why this doesn't happen more. Maybe it's just, I don't know. If I'm someone working in Hollywood and I'm in with Legendary or whatever, and I'm looking at all that's going on, and I don't know, maybe it's because I'm just a bigger kaiju Godzilla fan than the people that work in Hollywood. I mean, I know we have like Doherty, who was a fan of the franchise, but how big of a fan are you? Like, if I had the ability as a studio to approach Toho and Daiei and say, look, people want this film, and I just be like, look, just this is like throwing me throwing a bone to them. I'd be like, we'll give you 20 mil or whatever to make this film, and we'll only take like a small percentage while you two split up the rest, but we'll give you also more theaters to show this film in. So yeah, there may not be any benefit for America to do that, but the benefit is you get a movie that will excite people and get them to the theaters. I can guarantee you put Gamera versus Godzilla in the theaters, people will go see it because it's never been done. And if you do a good job promoting the fuck out of it, it's going to get people in the theaters. I'm sorry, it will, but you have to put the effort in. I went back and I remember all the PR, all the fucking promotional shit they did for Godzilla 98, dude. It was ridiculous. The amount of fucking promo they did for that fucking film. All the things in the fast food stuff with the cups, the figurines, you know, the posters and all that shit. So if you're going to waste money into that, and that's like probably one of the most subpar Godzilla films you were able to get, I would fucking do it for this. Because in the end, if America's Hollywood is going to get residuals off of that through the American theaters, it's nothing but a win for everybody involved. Like, I don't know. I think that Daiei and Toho as a collective are being short-sighted because look at what Minus One did just by itself. And now the same guy is going to do a sequel. Like, if they really felt that way, then they wouldn't be doing a sequel to Minus One because Minus One did not have a wide release in terms of theaters. And I apologize, I'm still fighting through my cold, but yeah, I hate the idea that these two companies are, I don't know if it's just more of like pride or like who they want to win or what, but I don't know. I think they need to figure this shit out because the fans really, really, really want this.
Still think merchandise-wise it would be a really good idea, and who knows, maybe someday Toho and Daiei could merge. Very unlikely. I'm just trying to spitball some fun ideas here, but that's ultimately why we never got to see Gamera versus Godzilla. It had nothing to do with the fact that it was never talked about or the fans wouldn't love to see it. It really looks like it's from the standpoint of the producers making money on their assets. That being said, Gamera actually has shown up in a newer Godzilla project very recently, appearing as the new Netflix series version of himself in the mobile game Godzilla Battle Line in 2023. It's kind of a shame everyone thinks an actual movie featuring the two monsters may never happen though, because I'm pretty confident it would turn out to be one of the biggest events in history for this genre.
Thank you. Thank you. That's what I just said. It's something that has never happened. This would be like if we all right now in modern day, if we were to have for the very first time Godzilla facing King Kong, it would be a fucking planetary event. It'd be the biggest fucking thing. In 62, it was a big deal. And like now, obviously, it's not as big a deal. It is cool because we redid it in 2021. But the reality is, this would be a first time ever event, dude. This is huge. Huge. And the fact that Daiei and Toho don't think they would make bank on this are out of their minds.
And just to give my own little opinion on the subject matter, setting it in the same universe as the Heisei movies for both Gamera and Godzilla would have been the absolute best way to make a project like this a mega hit. When it comes to the idea of Toho and Daiei teaming up in the late 90s,
the only reason why I don't think that's true is because at the time, because I know from experience, I didn't even know they were still making Godzilla films in the 90s. Like, that's how out of touch I was at the time with what was going on. Same with the Gamera stuff. I didn't get to any of those films until like well into the late 2000s. So when Godzilla 2000 came out, I was like, oh wow, they finally put another Godzilla film, because the one prior to that was 98, and then before that was 90 or 85. So I had missed like all these Toho films that I just didn't even know about. And same with the Gamera stuff. I had missed all this shit because the information wasn't out there for me to see it, and they weren't advertising it that I saw anywhere that I was at. And obviously, I'm a young man, so I'm kind of doing my own things on a daily basis without being sociable and everything else. So that's part of it too. But now with the age of internet, dude, this shit would sing. And if you did it with Godzilla Minus One, like even if it wasn't the next movie, let's say the director goes for a third, that's that's the end cap. That's the very capping the entire trilogy with like the best fucking one-on-one matchup that you could have. And that'd be sweet as fuck.
1990s to make Gamera versus Godzilla, whether it have been 1996 or 97 or whenever, you have to understand that both series of Gamera and Godzilla movies were and still are massively popular with both fan bases. Sure, every once in a while you get people hating the 1990s Godzilla films from the Heisei era for using too much beam attacks, and it is true that Gamera kind of made consistently better sequels in the same period of time, but I really do think this kind of movie would have been super successful had it have been made. And the reason I say that is because the Godzilla series in the Heisei days and the Gamera series as well are just iconic in every way, shape, and form imaginable. Iconic movie villains, iconic designs for both Gamera and Godzilla, and the storylines were actually much more sci-fi and much more intriguing, and the special effects were actually way better than what we had already seen in the Showa era. But when it comes to Godzilla vs. Gamera, unfortunately, it never happened, and the idea of such a film is all but impossible, even from what the filmmakers have stated themselves. But hey guys, what do all of you think? What are your thoughts on the idea of a Gamera vs. Godzilla movie? Do you think it would have worked out, and what kind of movie do you think it would have turned out being? Toho really tried to make a ton of different Godzilla sequels in that short period of time, even trying to get King Kong back, believe it or not, so I can imagine that after dealing with that kind of headache from Universal's copyright team, they didn't even want to touch Gamera, despite it obviously being an easier product to get off the ground. But hey, whatever your own thoughts and opinions happen to be on the subject matter, I'd love to hear all about them in the comments down below. Let me tell you something, brother.
Yeah, so yeah, I obviously I don't think you can go back. I mean, you could try to go back to the Heisei and say, let's use Junior, but again, you have to try to figure out like why Junior would be the baddie. Like you're gonna have to have a baddie, and Gamera's never been the baddie. So if you decide to go that route, what's the catalyst for Gamera to be the baddie? Or is it just another version of an Earth Defender that is like trying to be alpha, you know? But that's sort of just copying off the MonsterVerse. I think I would rather just play it off of the Minus One. So let's say they go with the sequel with Minus One. It's either Biollante or, you know, Hedorah, whatever fucking you wanted to do, right? Well, then I would go with the third one. I would say, this is what you're going to do. You're going to do this, and we'll eat that up, and then we'll come back, and then we'll top it all off with the cherry and bring in Gamera somehow. That would be fucking sweet, because you still got Godzilla as the villain. You have your antagonist and protagonist. So why not? Like, it can work. Trust me. Trust me, Anubis. Trust me. It'll work. But they got to get it done. And I think it's more about just egos, I think. And that's why I think actually it works better because we know Godzilla won't totally die. So even if Gamera defeats him, it's always going to be Godzilla coming back in some form or another. But at least this way, you don't have to really worry about trying to make two heroes out of those particular characters. We got one that's already doing shitty things. And then, as long as your stories are still good, like I wouldn't want to lose all that great storytelling that they did in Minus One. So I want that to be consistent. But they did that pretty well in the Gamera trilogy. So it can work. Just got and they're good at writing stories. Toho is. So yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts? What do you all think about this? And hit me up in the comments, man. I mean, I know we've been talking about this idea for ages. I didn't even know they were really playing around with the idea of making it, but based upon what I saw here, like it does make me itch to have it more now. Like I really, really want it. And now I'm almost like I'm confirming to myself that I kind of want them to do it part of the Minus One trilogy. Like I want them to do that. I know they haven't even talked about a third film with Minus One, but I can't see how the sequel to Minus One is going to fail. Like it's the same director, and he's really, really fucking good. Personally, I would go Biollante. That's sort of like my angle. Or if he's going to do like Godzilla raids again, then he'll do Angarius. But you got Angarius looking a little bit kind of like a turtle anyway. He's armadillo, but go Biollante. It makes sense with what's it, Shiriko as her name? I forget, Samiko. She has the infection. It kind of plays into the whole Biollante part of it, I think, with the heart and because that's sort of Biollante was sort of like that nice deep story that you had about, and with the plant and the creature and the connection, and so go with that, in my opinion, and then bring in Gamera for the third, and then that'd be like the best trilogy they probably would do in years. Like really, if they just do it well. Anyway, tell me what you think. What do you think about it all? Like and subscribe to the Meltdown Radio podcast. And yeah, man, enjoy the rest of your fucking day, dudes and dudettes.